Hi, Room 5. So I actually just got home from our classroom where I Zoomed with you guys, so I got to see you. And we're continuing our study of the ocean this week, which, as you know, is my favorite. So even if it's not your favorite, you just have to humor me and enjoy learning about it for the last couple weeks of school. It's my favorite because it houses my favorite animal, which is a whale, specifically the humpback whale. But it's also my favorite just because it's so big and it sort of has this personality of its own. And it has so many different habitats. So yesterday in our introduction, we went over some basics about the ocean, which is 70% of the earth is liquid water, but it's mostly salt water. And then the ocean has 3 zones, kind of like a hotel. So the top zone is the sunlight zone, where the sun hits the water. And then it moves down into the twilight zone. And then at the bottom, the midnight zone. So if we were studying in this in the classroom, what we would do is we would have our papers ready to go. And then basically we collect resources. And that is the best way to study. It's doing research. So we would collect resources from all over. So today I'll show you what I'm using. I'm using this book, which I know some of you have printed out and are using with me. If you did not print this out though, it's okay. I'm going to show you how to just use a piece of paper. And then because I was just at school, I was able to grab some resources. So I'm going to show you some of my favorite books that I like to study out of. And that way, when you get the opportunity to go back to a library, you can check some of these out. These books all started as Campbell's when she was little, and her favorite habitat has always been the ocean. So when she was little, she would collect all these ocean books, and now I get to have them in the classroom. So I'll show you which ones I grabbed. I grabbed my first big book of oceans, okay? And then I grabbed this big ocean, a visual encyclopedia, awesome book. And then I also grabbed Ocean Animals, okay, which is happens to be another National Geographic Kids book, which I love. So a lot of the videos that I link you to are National Geographic Kids. They just have really organized, great information. So today I'm going to take this page off. Okay. And we are only going to focus on the sunlight zone. Okay. So I'm going to get my markers. And if you're doing this on a piece of paper, we're just going to write sunlight zone at the top. This would be our title. Sun, light, zone. And I gave them uppercases, like first name, last name. And then since it's a heading and I'm sort of doing a one-pager, I'm going to make it look good. Okay. Now, next to the sunlight zone, I'm going to draw a couple different things. I'm going to draw some waves, since we are talking about the ocean. And then over, it looks like I have the most room over here. I'm going to draw the sun. Okay. And I'm going to start by reading what the sunlight zone says in our ocean book. The sunlight zone is the area on the top part of the ocean that gets the most sunlight. This is the smallest zone in the ocean, but 90% of ocean life can be found here. 90%, that's pretty amazing. So there's actually a lot of notes that I want to take down in just that part. So I'm going to switch to a pink marker, I think. And the first thing I'm going to write is it's the area that gets the most sun. Okay. And then it says it's the smallest zone in the ocean. So out of our 3 zones that we learned about, sunlight, twilight, midnight, it's actually the smallest zone. But 90% of ocean life can be found here. So that's pretty crazy. 90% of life is found here. And the word life right here means plants and animals. So 90% of life. So to give you an idea of what that means, anything that we talk about has 100%. 100% means the whole thing. So in the ocean, there's 100% of life. Okay, well, the easiest way for us to count to 100 is by tens, right? So look, I'm going to make a circle for every 10. Watch. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. Okay, this is all the life in the whole entire ocean, from the top all the way down to the bottom. Now, we just read in our notes that 90% of life is found here. That means 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. Out of all the plants and animals in the ocean, the ones that I colored in all live in the sunlight zone. So that means in the twilight zone and in the midnight zone, there's only 10% of life. That's pretty amazing. So I wanted to show you some things that I found. This book says Layers of Life, and we're going to keep going back to it. I'm just going to read you the sunlight zone one today. This is a really awesome picture over here that I'll hold up. You can pause it if you want, so you can sort of see how the watercolor changes. You can see that sunlight zone at the top. I'm going to turn this back here like that so you can look at it while I read. It says, from the ocean's surface, surface means the top, to about 328 feet below the waves, plants, plankton, and animals soak up the abundant sunlight that filters down from below. Sea creatures, big and small, feast in this nourishing underwater garden. And so this is this whole area right here, the sunlight zone. Okay. Now what you can't see, but if you look really closely over here, this is the twilight zone and this is the midnight zone. So it's pretty crazy that in this tiny little bit of ocean, just the top part, 90% of ocean life lives there. That's pretty wild. We're going to keep referring back to this book throughout the week. Here's another one that shows, they call it the depth zones. Okay. And this picture I really like because you can really see how that sunlight comes in at the top, and you can really see how by the bottom, it just can't travel through water that far. The light gets blocked. It just can't get down there. Let's see what it says over here. The top 660 feet, so this has different information in it, are often called the sunlit zone. Here the water is lit up with enough sunlight to support the plant-like plankton that need light to live and multiply. Since these are the main source of food in the ocean, this is where most marine animals live. So now one thing that happens when we're researching is we're using different resources. So we're using 2 different books right here, and they've given us some different information. The numbers were a little bit different. And so sometimes what we have to do is we have to just take from one or the other, or we have to try and compare and see if we can see similarities. So we do know that most marine animals live here, and that's exactly what this note said. And of course it said because the plants have to live there. Now, why do the plants have to live in the sunlight zone? Because plants need light. That's what their leaves do. Their leaves, remember, they're like solar panels. They collect all that sunlight, and then they start growing, they start making their food. So that's why it's so important that they live here. So one of the habitats in the ocean that is one of the most popular to learn about in this sunlight zone are coral reefs, okay? So that's what it talks about in your report or in your packet. If you're using this, it talks about coral reefs. And today we are going to look at some pictures of some coral reefs, and we're going to figure out why they're so popular. I have to say, to be honest, when I was a little girl, the reason they're so popular is because they're so beautiful. They have so many gorgeous colors. So in this book, I found some stony coral, and I just wanted to show you some of the different colors as you flip through, because it's just gorgeous, all the different kinds of coral. Now, what you need to know about coral is it's actually an animal. So coral, it says, coral animals are called polyps. Each coral polyp is tiny. Its body is soft, like its jellyfish relatives. So coral is actually a living plant. Isn't that just gorgeous? Oh, and there's Nemo, who lives in the sea anemone in the coral reef. I believe in one of these, here we go, sunlit zone. This shows you more of the plants and animals that live in the sunlight zone. That's that plankton that they were talking about. Plankton is so important because it's tiny, 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 tiny little organisms, but it feeds most of our ocean. And plankton needs sunlight to grow. So you can see how important it would be for it to be up there. Let's see. Sorry, I'm switching back and forth between. Here's some more pictures of some coral reefs. They're just gorgeous. So we are going to make our next note. If you're doing a one-pager like I am, the next note that we're going to make is coral reefs. Okay, and let's see what it says. Coral reefs are found in the sunlight zone. Coral looks like a plant, but it is really an animal with a very hard skeleton. Coral can come together to form reefs that are home to many living things, such as fish, eels, and mollusks. So, some notes that I just read. I'm going to put a little bit of a bubble around here. Some things that I just read when I was reading, that if you're following along, something that you can do is you can just underline this while you're reading. I'm going to put a note. Looks like a plant. But it's really an animal. With a hard skeleton. Now, if you are making a one-pager, you can pause to write those notes, or you can write your own. I'm just reading them right off of here. Okay? And they're home to many living things. So even though the coral reef itself is an animal, it's actually also a habitat. Isn't that fascinating? Nutrient-rich plants also grow within coral reefs. Some plants you can find in the coral reef are seaweed, different algae, and seagrass. So it says nutrient-rich plants. That means full of vitamins. Nutrient-rich plants grow. Okay, so there are some notes about coral reefs. Now, I noticed when I was reading that it gave us some examples of some animals and plants. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write animals right here, and I'm going to write plants right over here. Because on a one-pager report like this, basically what we want to do is we want to put the most interesting information that we found, and so we could reteach about the sunlight zone to somebody who had questions. So if you're watching this video right now, your mom or your dad or your brothers or sisters might not know these things about the sunlight zone. So what we do is we just take notes. We're not writing a beautiful paragraph. We're not hanging this up on the wall. But we're putting the most important information so that you can then walk out of wherever you are and say, I'm going to give you a quick presentation on what I learned about the sunlight zone. So let's see what kinds of animals they mentioned there are. They said for animals, fish, eels, and mollusks. Now it also has a little fun fact right here about mollusks. Mollusks are soft-bodied animals. Many mollusks have a hard shell, like a conch or a clam, but others do not have a hard shell, like an octopus or a squid. So this is the perfect place on a one-pager where you could draw a picture to remind yourself what a mollusk is. So on here you can see they even did that. So what we would do in the classroom is we would probably copy some of those little pictures. So I might draw a little clam. Okay. And then I might draw an octopus. There we go. Little cartoon octopus. Okay. So now over here into plants. The plants that it said were seaweed, algae, and seagrass. And this again might be where I draw an ocean plant, okay? One of the coolest things that this says is many people call coral reefs the rainforests of the ocean. And I find that that's very important. So I'm going to want to put that down here where I talked about coral reefs. So on my one-pager, we talked about the sunlight zone. And then we're giving an example of a habitat that lives in the sunlight zone. So there are many different things that live in the sunlight zone. We're just giving an example, the coral reefs. So what I'm definitely going to want to do is put right here, right in the middle, the rainforest of the ocean. There we go. Now what I would spend my next time doing is coloring it in, maybe with some crayons, making it look a little bit better. But now you know a little bit more about that sunlight zone. The sunlight zone, it was interesting. I was just talking to Cammie and Teddy before I came in to shoot this video. And I said, oh, I need to go do a sunlight zone video. And Cammie said, oh, that's the zone we swim in. And she's right. All humans swim in the sunlight zone when you go into the ocean. So that is the area that you actually go into. And when we look at this big, deep, deep ocean, we actually just go in the tippy, tippy, tippy top. If you think about it, we swim right along the surface the whole time because we need to come back up for air. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the first layer of the ocean. If you're working on the report, you can keep going. Like I said, you can underline things, you can take notes on things. If you're doing a one-pager like me, you can pause, you can go back, you can start over, do it again, whatever. Or if you were just listening, I hope you learned something new. All right, so I'll see you back tomorrow for the Twilight Zone. I love you. I miss you. I wish we were researching this together, but it's fun nonetheless. And there's no place like home. Bye.